Greetings, productive programmer. So let's go ahead and continue our journey here with our stories. We want these listings of our stories to only be accessible behind an authentication. So we want to require the user to log in, basically be registered and log in before they can see these posts. So, because right now we saw in the previous video, basically anybody can generate these without having to be logged in. That's not what we want. So let's go ahead and let's take these endpoints here and let's move these down to be authenticated. So just to show you again, we touched on this briefly in the previous video, there are authentication routes down here in our router.ex. We could theoretically just add this, we could just add the require authenticated. We could just come in here and modify this existing scope here, but that's not what we want to do. This one is basically designed to be all publicly accessible endpoints. So we're just going to take these and move these down to where there is authentication being required. So require authenticated user, and it mounts the user auth module here, and it makes sure that it ensures authentication. So this is all generated for us with our authentication generator. And all we have to do is just put these endpoints right in here. And now authentication will be required. So let's save that and go back to our application. And then if we refresh this page, we see that when we try to go to the stories endpoint, it redirects us back here to our login. So we are forced to sign up if we want to access that endpoint. So previously we came in here and we did stories/to/edit. If we try to go there, it's going to force us to go back. It says you must log in to access this page. So authentication enforced just by simply putting those routes inside of the appropriate scope that has the appropriate authentication requirement. So require authenticated user. The way that this works is there's middleware that pipes through the require authenticated user. So if we do a quick search for that, this was generated for us with our authentication generator. You can see that our authentication generator created the user_auth file, and that has the require authenticated user function here. And it says it's used for routes that require the user be authenticated. So when this basically, every time a request comes through our router, it gets piped through this function before it goes to our route. And it just ensures that the user must be logged in order to access it. So if the connection has the current user set up there, then it just continues to return the connection, and then our application goes to the appropriate route. Otherwise, it redirects the user and notifies them that they must log in to access the page, just like we saw that error that says you must log in to access this page. So that's where this is coming from. So pretty cool. And again, a lot of it feels like magic because Phoenix LiveView just takes care of all of that with its generators. So it just offloads a lot of the work for us. And that's what I love about all the productivity gains that you get from using the generators and Phoenix LiveView in general. So great. So we now have all of our endpoints authenticated, and that's all we really had to do. Pretty impressive, right? So let's go ahead and log in, make sure we can still access those. So I'm going to try to go to the stories endpoint. It says you must log in to access this page. Let's log in. So logging in as test@test.com, that user that we created before. If you didn't create a user before, or you forgot the user that you created to test your application with, you could just sign up now, and you'll be able to access your application. So let's sign in. And you can see it takes us to the endpoint that we wanted to go to. So now that I'm logged in, I can access this endpoint. I can edit everything. I can modify these files just like we could before, but I'm required to be authenticated at this point. So I log back out and I try to go back to that page we're at, and it forces me to go back here to log in. So very simple, but obviously there's still the issue that we saw before, which is that if we were to inspect our database again, this is the code that we had printed out in the previous video when we inspected our database table for stories. The user ID was missing. We haven't done anything to actually set up the user ID in the stories. All we've done is put these behind a require authentication endpoint. So just to show you again, this is my new story, and I'll just save some random body text here, save this. So that's the new story I just created while I was logged in. Let's go and see, does that user ID get generated there? Well, it's not going to. So just PSQL to log into Postgres. We're going to connect to our blog dev and we are going to look at our table again. So let's select all the latest data from the stories table. And we can see this is the new story, still no user ID. So the generators that Phoenix LiveView provides to you, they do help us out significantly, obviously, but they're not going to do everything for you. You still have to be obviously a developer. We need to make sure that when we save the application, the current user will get associated with these stories. So in theory, if I log out right now as test@test.com and I just do new story, this was created by the test@test.com user. So if I create this and it says body cannot be blank, so we're just going to set a random body. So this was created by test@test.com user. Let's log out, register as a new user, and enter a random password. So our new user logs in, creates an account, and then if they go back to the /stories endpoint, then they can see everything that test@test.com user created. So if I go to edit the story, authentication works, but authorization. So authentication works, but authorization does not work. So our application requires us to authenticate to edit these endpoints, but it does not handle authorization right now, such as who's authorized to edit these posts. Well, ideally, we only want users that have created the post be able to edit their own post or delete their own post. We don't want some random user to delete somebody else's post. So we still have to set up the authorization component of this. So there's a difference between authentication and authorization. Authentication requires us to be logged in, but we also have to handle, well, how do we control who can basically use these endpoints? So we need to create that code, and that's what we're going to do in the next lesson. But I just wanted to show you the authorization endpoint of this. Now, one last thing I want to show you with the tests. I just want to run a mixed test really quickly and show you that the tests are now going to be failing. When we run these tests, what happens is we move the code here. So these endpoints, they were not authenticated before, but we moved them down here. So we actually can't we can't actually test these in the tests. It's going to cause our test to fail because our tests cannot access these endpoints anymore. So it's redirected. You can see it says redirected to log in to access the page. So the way that we would fix this is we would go into the test that's failing. So in this case, it's the story_live_test.exs. This is inside of our test folder. So let's go down to test folder first, blog web, live, and story live tests. So in order to allow our test to pass, the auth generator that Phoenix provides to us also has a useful helper code. We can just say setup, and we can do register and log in user. So this is provided to us by Phoenix when we use the auth generator. So if we take this and we just do a Control F for it, we can see that there's a connection case that was created that says register and log in user. So this is a helper just to help us in our tests. And we can see that is inside of test/support. So if we save this and we go back to our terminal and we run mixed test now, our test should pass. So our test file will now simulate registering and logging in as a user before the tests run. And that allows our test to now pass. So I just want to quickly show you that because some of you might run mixed test after moving these endpoints down here to this authentication endpoint, and then your test stopped working. So I just wanted to address that so that you realize that there is a solution for everything. And in this case, it is to basically set up a register and login user in our test. But for the remainder of this course, I'm going to stop running the mixed test now until our final video maybe. So roughly towards the end of the course, probably our final video or close towards the end of the course, I'll clean up all the tests. But for now, since we are going to be moving things around, such as these endpoints, all we did is we moved them from being publicly accessible to authenticated. And you can see how it caused all the tests to break just with that one little simple change. And since I'll be demonstrating a lot of things, such as I wanted to demonstrate, okay, you can access these, they're public. Now you can't access them because they require authentication. And I wanted to explain the authentication. And since I want to do things like that, move it around and demonstrate a lot of principles in this course, I don't want to run the tests every single time and then have to go and make them pass. So if you run the tests throughout this course, you might see they start failing. And if you want to fix them, that's fine. But I'm going to wait until the end of the course to fix my tests, because I will be moving a lot of things around between every single video. And it will just take additional time to make the test pass when we're just going to end up breaking them again. So I'm going to wait until everything is working in our application before we end up testing it and making sure that the tests are passing. And just let you know that, if your tests are failing, there is a solution for everything. And in our case, it was to make sure that our endpoint, our tests allow us to register a user, which is a really useful thing to know, because you probably will build applications that require authentication. So if you want to write tests for those, you want to register and log in your user in the setup of your test. So this is huge. This is really good information to know and a really valuable lesson. But again, for the remainder of this course, we'll refrain from making our test pass until towards the end of the course. We'll go ahead and we'll do some cleanup and we'll just get everything looking good there. All right, so I'll see you over in the next lesson, where we are going to tie the users to these stories that we've been created. Because as we could see, the test user was also able to have their post deleted and edited by the new user that was registered. So we have authentication working, but we don't have authorization working. So we're going to set it up so that our blog post will now be tied to the user, and we'll make sure that users can only edit and delete the post that they create. And also they'll only be able to see the post that they create, right? Because there's no reason to see somebody else's posts when you're doing the editing of your application. And again, we're going to be making this function very similar to medium.com. So you'll be able to, as on medium.com, only I can edit my blog posts. So we want to have that same functionality set up here. They have a nice little link to our stories. So we're going to set up a link to our stories. And yeah, we're just going to build out this entire application to be fully functional and get cranking. So I'll see you over in the next lesson where we continue our journey. All right, awesome. I'll see you in the next lesson.